Welcome to the Skaterade podcast. I'm Jasmine,
I'm Mac.
and today we are here with our pal Yeti. Care to introduce yourself, Yeti?
Hi, I'm Yeti Or Not. Here I come. Or Yeti Spaghetti, Yeti Regretti, Yeti So Ready, or Not Ready sometimes. And I skate for Gotham.
Yay. Do you want to share anything else about yourself?
Sure. I am a science journalist by trade. I report on space and dinosaurs and dead people for the Wall Street Journal. And at Gotham, I'm a member of the coaching committee and a co-captain of the Brooklyn Bombshells home team and on the All-Stars, or was on the All-Stars, and was on travel team leadership in 2022 as much as it was. And yeah.
Awesome. So why don't we just get started with kind of the skating background, how you got into skating, what's happening with your skating these days, and then we can dive into some of the different sports you've played, maybe some of the journalism piece. But give us your kind of roller skate journey.
Well, so for ski racing, sometimes we rollerbladed for like cross training, and I still have my rollerblades. And I graduated from college in 2015, and I got a job at the same school right out of college. And at lunchtime, I would rollerblade for shits and giggles. And my coworker in my office caught me rollerblading one lunchtime and was like, "What are you doing? Stop it. Stop it right now." And she played roller derby. She played for Twin State Derby, which is based out of like Vermont and New Hampshire's Upper Valley. And funnily enough, like that night was their fresh meat intake day for the season. And so she was like, absolutely, you absolutely need to come. And luckily I did. I remember being on the fence about it. I don't remember why, but I'm so glad I went. And that was it. I mean, I skated with Twin State from October of 2015 until the following September. And then I moved to Santa Cruz for grad school, joined Santa Cruz Derby Girls. It's now Santa Cruz Roller Derby. Skated with them through November of 2018 and then moved to New York in January of 2019 and joined Gotham. So I guess it's been, oh my God, more than 6-7 years now. Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's so cool. And you said that started with rollerblades that sort of were a part of your skiing.
Yeah,
You did like some pretty intense competitive skiing growing up, yeah?
I did. Yeah. So I started skiing when I was 2 and started ski racing when I was 4. Funnily enough, it was like for my birthday, our tiny little mountain back home. So I grew up in Rochester, New York. We have this tiny hill called Hunt Hollow. And on Sundays, they do the Lovejoy race. And it was my birthday on Sunday. And the Lovejoy could either be from halfway or it can be from the top. And I was like, yo, I want to go from the top. I want to do the race from the top. And mom was like, no. And I was like, yes. And anyway, so I didn't get off the lift at halfway. I went all the way to the top and skied the full length course and was hooked on ski racing from that point on. So I think for the next like maybe 10 years, it was mostly local races, trying to make states. You have different age brackets as you age up, like same as hockey or anything like that. And when I was in ninth grade, I decided to go to a ski academy in Lake Placid, New York. That's where the 1980 Olympics were, 1932 Olympics were. The Miracle movie, that's Lake Placid. And
Mhm.
my mom and I made this deal where I would go for winter term. So I would do my public school from September to November. And then I would ski from November to April in Lake Placid, doing my schoolwork remotely. And then I would return home from April till June. So this was sort of because we had moved and we had made some financial sacrifices so that we could live in a school district with a good school system. And so that was sort of our compromise. So I could ski and pursue my passion, but also get the education that my mom wanted. And that was fantastic. The academy life really made me who I am today, I would say. And I took a gap year before college, which was fantastic. I had the opportunity to ski all over the world, Switzerland, Alaska, Chile. We would go to Chile in August and September every year because it's their winter when it's our summer for training camp. And then I skied for Dartmouth Division 1 alpine skiing. And so that was pretty much my whole life until I tore my ACL twice.
We should talk about that at some
Yeah.
point. But for, what's
Oh, that's
standing
fine.
out to me is
I
like
play derby now. Woo.
Yeah.
somehow, some way, it seems like you're just really, like kind of built to be an athlete. Like that level of training is like so intense and like resonates with me because I did like girls travel hockey and had a very similar situation where I'd be going to training camps and I was playing at a pretty high level, but nothing quite so international. I played D3 college, but like it's a type of lifestyle, and it's like a real commitment to compete at that level and to do it for so long. So I just have a lot of respect for that decision and for like being able to make it work as a family. I know like that struggle and yeah, it's cool to hear about your experiences with that.
You saying that you started skiing at 2 years old made something click in my head because I was doing the research on you and read that you spent the first 22 years of your athletic career skiing. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. 22 years. How old is Yeti? You started skiing when you were 2 years old. That's wild to me. I didn't even know a 2-year-old could ski.
I know. I'm like, those ski boots are like the size of your whole leg. Like what?
I still have them. They're in the basement. And, they started you
Oh
with
my
edgy
God.
wedgies, those things that like hold the tips together in a pizza. And then it was like daycare, like free daycare. They're like, go, be free. Don't fall off the chairlift. Cool. It was great. I honestly like to have your whole life revolve around one thing for so long. It gives you a lot of perspective. Life was simpler back then, to be honest with you. Everything was like funneled through the lens of, will this make me a better ski racer?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's relatable. It's relatable for sure.
And also, from what I was reading about actually, you gave me this information that you studied tap jazz and ballet as a young person as well. So it sounds like being baby Yeti was pretty fun and that your parents kept you engaged and, in touch with your body at all times. What was that like?
Ballet, I always feel like ballet was like my super secret weapon. Honestly, I don't think people see Yeti and they're like, oh, totally ballet dancer. It was just the best cross training for skiing because, it required flexibility, it required balance, it required like knowing where you were in space and time. And let's be real, I've never done a split in my life. My leg goes to like maybe 100 degrees. And like we'd have people in class where the leg would like go up and over their head. My best friend was like that. And so I just decided to be the class turner instead. So I can do like pirouettes and stuff real good, but I can't do a split. It is great because it kind of kept me grounded as a kid because I feel like sometimes all the skiing and traveling would go to your head. I think it wasn't a typical experience. And my ballet class was a very, we all went to high school and had boyfriends and drama and like, was our dress going to be pink or blue and what was outfits like and picture day and makeup. And so it was sort of like I live in the ski world and then I'd come back and our recital was always in June. And then it was sort of a return to reality. Yeah, it was a lot of ballet. It was like 12 hours a week of ballet. It was a lot. I guess I never half-assed anything.
That's a lot on top of skiing.
Do you think that experience of staying grounded made you the empathetic person that you are today? Because I mean, I've only met you twice in real life, but I've heard so many stories from Mac and Roxy and Paco about how amazing you are. And you you gave this really beautiful note to Roxy that she keeps on her desk. That was one of the most poetic, kind things that I had ever read. And then I was talking to Paco, aka Steve Nash, about it. And they said, oh yeah, Yeti writes notes like that to all of us.
Yeah,
So
I have one too.
It was a Christmas gift.
Yeah, that's so sweet.
I don't know. I think I'm a better writer than I am a talker. Like I feel like writing is my best medium of communication and expression. I guess I picked the right profession. As for the empathy part, I feel like it's followed me my whole life. And I think it is because I often exist in such a liminal space. When going to the ski academy, I didn't quite fit in my high school because I was gone for half the year. And I didn't quite fit in my ski academy because most of the people who went there were there all 9 months of the school year. So I think it was always really a matter of like, how can I make deep connections with people when I can't see them all the time? I don't have the luxury of proximity always. And I don't know, I think a lot of my empathy comes from my grandma, actually. She and I were very close when I was younger. We used to do Friday night blockbuster movies, Gumball Machine.
Cute.
And then she moved away when I was like 11, and I still call her twice a day, every day. And she's very empathetic. And I think I'm like one of the only people who treats her like a like her own person and not as someone who's aging and elderly. And I feel like the empathy that I bring to the conversation with my grandmother, I just bring to all my conversations and friends. Never thought about that until I said that out loud right now. So great question.
Oh,
But yeah, that's me.
I love that.
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds like it's a combination of like relationships and like spaces that you were in and kind of how you navigated those spaces in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can say, from personal experience, it's been so great to be a teammate and a friend and to like work with you in leadership at Gotham. Like, I just feel like, you really embody a lot of great qualities as a leader, and because of, you really bring that empathy in and you think really critically about a lot of different stuff. So, it's been felt and appreciated for what that's worth.
Thanks. That means a lot to me. I'm really glad that we were teammates.
Me too.
I have to be honest with you. Like the first 3 months, I was like, oh, Mac is so good. I have to be better than Mac. Never mind. Actually, I'll do friends than Mac. It'll be fine. And then we ended up doing different jobs, and I was like, thank God.
Yeah, I gotta say, it was like so fun to skate with you and to kind of come into Gotham like around similar times.
Yeah.
To be a part of that kind of class joining around the same time, I always felt a certain like kinship with you, and also really felt like, oh my God, Yeti's so good. Like, what the fuck? But it was nice because I feel like for me at least that I was able to kind of feed off of that, and in some ways I think we made each other better, and that was really great.
Yeah. I was very grateful. I feel like, not to toot our horns or anything, you and I think had a very positive impact on that season on the All-Star team and the league in general. And I'm thrilled that we sort of fed into each other.
Yeah, me too.
Before we fully segue into roller derby, can we talk a little bit about the ending of your skiing career at Dartmouth, or the injury happened at Dartmouth, from what I understand? And how did you sort of end up in you told us how you ended up there, but what was the transition like from having your whole life being skiing to your whole life being roller derby?
That's a great question. I feel like I'm one of those people that is obsessed, and I'm obsessed with one thing. And I feel, your obsessions become your possessions. And for the first 22 years or however long, it was skiing. It was always skiing. And then I tore my ACL during a stupid race that it didn't matter. I shouldn't have gone. I let my coach sort of pressure me into going. He pressured us all into going. It was a very high pressure environment. Only 6 people made the carnival team, which is the team that gets to race for the school. And we had a team of 15 people. So it was like you always had to have your foot on the gas. And I had been doing really well. And I don't know, so many regrets. Shouldn't have been there, was too tired, just a freak thing. And then it happened, and I was like, I'm going to get back on the horse. It's 6 months. Like, fuck the haters. Bought a stim machine, like went to therapy 3-4 days a week, got it fixed right away. And then that summer we went to Chile, and I just like couldn't get back on the horse. It was awful. It was like I could not. I was slow, so bad. And I never figured out why. And I continued to throw myself into practice and like cross training. But at that point, I had spent the last 6 months sort of diversifying my school experiences, right? I couldn't ski. So I joined my coeducational fraternity and took a leadership there and like became a tour guide and started writing for the school newspaper and like had a boyfriend. And I started to lean more heavily into those aspects and temper my skiing with those other elements. And so skiing became sort of the thing that I did for myself rather than for life. And I took sort of a more leadership role on the team, trying to teach our freshmen and sophomores that, schoolwork is equally as important as your ski racing and should be. And then my senior year, I crashed again. Tore it again. Didn't fix it this time. I didn't want to go through that process again, and just decided to go to PT like a wild person and just strengthen all the muscles that keep sort of the ACL in place and the kneecap in place. And it actually worked out really well for me. I got really bad patellar tendonitis the first time. And that stim machine is like the most awful thing in the history of the planet. Like truly torturing yourself to try and keep your muscles from atrophying. And I just didn't want to do it. Between skiing and roller derby, I became obsessed with my relationship, which was a mistake, but it's 2020 hindsight. Yeah, so like I can equally be as invested in a person as I can in a sport, apparently. And then it was sort of towards the twilight of that particular relationship that I found roller derby and sort of just transitioned to roller derby being the nexus of Yeti's universe. Um, and, that was like that until the panini. And now it's no longer the nexus. It's just a critical aspect to who I am as a human being. So I guess in that regard, COVID was great. Sorry, that was a very long-winded answer, but
No, that was great. In saying that, okay, so I think I'm going to use this word, but I'm similar to you in that I tend to have obsessions. And it's also this thing where, like, as I phased out of roller derby, I was like, okay, what's the next thing I'm going to dive head first into? And now it's like, there's this whole other world for me with performance and stuff because derby isn't really
yeah.
sustainable for me anymore. But in that process, I also feel like I had to try to find a little more balance because being so kind of like obsessed with something, I was realizing how much it was impacting other areas of my life. And I think I'm kind of curious for you hearing that roller derby is not as much a nexus so much, but still a critical part of your life. Like, does that feel like balance for you? Like, is that feeling good? Or is that more just a product of like derby is a little bit less available right now in some ways or both maybe?
I'd love to give you the Yeti's developed as a person answer, but it's truly I think that my lack of obsession with derby is truly chalked up to the paucity of opportunities right now.
Yeah.
I think that if somehow in some alternate Matrix universe we had returned to Gotham as it was, I would be similarly obsessed. However, I do think that the pandemic has taught me the importance of diversifying where you are in time and space. I feel like we spent so much time in Crashpad in that tiny corner of the
Mhm.
universe that it's really
Mhm.
there are other things out there. Like I got to go back to Turkey for the first time in 8 years and I kept turning my mom's invitation down because she would go in the fall and it was too close to Champs. Or, in 2019, my best friends got married and their honeymoon was in Hawaii. And our friend invited me down there and it was in October. And I said, nope, I didn't want to go because it was too close to Champs. And I think a lot of my decision making in that regard, like foregoing other opportunities that might expand my experiences instead of roller derby, I think I make different decisions now.
Yeah, very relatable. It's part of what makes you a really good athlete and a really good teammate. In many ways, to turn down those invitations, I was doing very similar things for 10 years of my life. Like, nope, can't do that. I got practice. Nope, can't do that. I got a tournament coming up. Nope, can't do that. I got to save for this tournament coming up. Like, so much of that, and it was worth it,
Yeah.
for me at the time for many, many years. But it can kind of keep your world small in certain ways, so that makes sense. I'm glad you got to go back to Turkey. That's awesome.
Yeah, me too. I cried stepping off the plane. It was just surreal
Mm.
experience.
Yeah. On Instagram, you reflected on how the Panini has sort of refocused what was important to you, like you just said about, traveling back to Turkey and things like that. And you mentioned on Instagram that you realize there are things that are more important in life than roller derby, and that self reflection was needed to implement needed change in the fabric of the sport. What did you mean when you said that?
So
We're
I
pulling out the
think,
risk.
yeah, never write it down if you don't want someone to quote it back to you. Um, I think that I'm still relatively new to the sport. I don't have the institutional knowledge from the WFTDA from Gotham. Uh, I'd only been to champs once, but I think that there were a lot of that's just the way we do it. And we've always done it this way. And it's never going to change elements to the way that the sport and postseason opportunities were set up. That just there was no time for reflection because we were always just hurling headfirst into the next season.
Mhm.
Myself included, but like not just skaters individually, but leagues and the organization as a whole. There was no discussion about access and opportunity and is this the best way to foster growth in people that are not in the top 10 division 1 teams. And as someone who's skated for like yeah, I think Twin States maybe top 150 or something, and then Santa Cruz was like 20th to 15th, and then Gotham was like 3rd to 1st. I think having all that different perspective to come into the sport really made me think about that there are there are elements that need to change. And I think that many of those changes are being implemented. Um, and then it's sort of, by the other token, is how much can you change and still maintain the professionalism, the competitive aspects, the aspects that draw so many people to our sport. So it's all, I think it's always a balance, but that's definitely, I think, what I was going for with that assessment.
Yeah. I definitely like reflect a lot of that. And it was something that I found really frustrating with the sport at times. Like that very thing that you talk about in terms of this thing of like, well, there's not a lot of time to slow down because there's always the next thing that we're planning for or training for. And in my 10 years in the sport, in many ways, especially on the greater level, like WIFTDA level, like, you know, like international level, it almost started to feel like this is a machine that like no one really has control over. And if you want to kind of stick your finger in a cog to kind of be like, wait a minute, let's slow it down, or let's try to do something different, or reconfigure the machine, it was kind of too much of a machine to feel like you could do that. Honestly, like I really struggled to feel like there were opportunities to be like, here's a better way of doing this, or here's a different way of thinking about it. And I had similar experiences with people kind of just being like, well, this is just how it is. And that's honestly something that exhausted me out of the sport. If I'm being totally honest, like I just was like, I can't, like, I was seeing too many things around like inequality, and when it comes to sponsorship, when it comes to representation in the sport, when it comes to leagues recreating certain systems and cycles. And I heard about a lot of commonalities across leagues that I was like, wow, okay, if every league is experiencing something along these lines, or there's all these people talking about these experiences they've had across different leagues in different parts of the country and world where these things are still happening, like where is the problem, and why aren't we getting more serious about addressing those problems? And I mean, there's a lot I could say about it, but a lot of it came down to like accessibility and like ways that people were thinking about that, I think. And yeah, it can be kind of frustrating. And my hope was that the pandemic would help people take that time and reflect. And I think it has in some ways. And in other ways, I think I'm not as plugged in anymore, but in some ways it kind of hasn't, you know, there's a lot of like, we just want to get back to what we had, what we knew, which is kind of interesting to witness for me.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I've noticed in the last year there are strata of privilege in regards to leagues' resources when trying to rebuild. There are
Mm-hmm.
certain leagues that remain virtually identical to their pre pandemic selves, both
Mm-hmm.
in operations and venues and scheduling. And then there are leagues that were totally decimated, not only on the space front, but on the programming front, on the membership front, on the financial front, and everybody in between. And it's been interesting to see how the discourse has been in part dominated by those programs that were not as affected by pandemic in terms of financial and membership issues.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have a question in here too about actually like the ways that Gotham was kind of affected with some stuff and how like we lost the space as well. And you know, we're kind of wondering from your perspective what it was like to kind of let go of that space, and what it's been like to kind of be without a space as you've gotten back into things.
It's been rough. I mean, I won't sugarcoat it. I know why we made the decision to let go of the space, but it's been incredibly difficult finding anything, and it's at times extremely depressing. And things in New York City move so slowly with regards to certificates of occupancy and this, that, and the other. And is there a pillar there and stuff like that? Sometimes I'm like, it's hopeless, but it's not. I think that's depressing. Yeti talking. I think it has challenged us as a league to be more creative with the way we utilize our time, the way we utilize our person power, the way, we eliminated Diamond District, which was sort of where you would go if you didn't have a home team, and we made some mistakes, I think, along the way that we hope to rectify in 2023. I think everybody's going to get a home team this year, hopefully. So I feel like that's a really good step forward. Um, but it's also been difficult. Like, you can't really have a home team practice because you only get so many hours at the practice space. And our other option is outside and it's much cheaper, but it's weather dependent and it's far away from a lot of folks. And I think it's really been a good lesson in being grateful for what we have and helping us sort of move outside this idea that we have to go back to exactly the way it was before, because that is legitimately impossible at this juncture.
Adaptation, baby.
Speaking of adaptation, I know that you've been giving skating around, as you say, try by participating in super teams and mashup games. What did you learn through this approach to post-pandemic derby?
I know that not everyone is a fan of the idea of skating around, and I certainly didn't mean to be quote unquote disloyal to Gotham or anything to that effect, but I really wanted to learn as much as I could this year because the opportunities for learning at home were limited compared to sort of 2019 Gotham, let's say. And one of my biggest mottos across any sport is that everyone can teach you something. And so I just really tried to capitalize on opportunities to skate with folks from other leagues, folks with different derby experiences, folks from different continents. And I had a blast. Like truly, it was a delight to be exposed to different start formations, different ideas about offense and defense, different ideas about even pregame preparation and warm-ups and rah-rah speeches from your captains, different types of management, different ways that people prioritize different elements on the track. And it was really fun to play roller derby for fun. It was weird. I had the same problem with skiing where I didn't ski for a long time because I was like, I don't know how to ski for fun. Skiing for fun is dumb. There's no gates to go around. Trees are stupid. Well, I can only skate if it's like Hydra preparation. And then I realized that it's you can have a blast and you can still develop as an athlete even in situations where the score doesn't matter as much. These are written down anywhere for posterity. So I had a blast. Truly, RollerCon was a highlight. I got to skate with the European All-Stars through serendipitous happenstance at Hometown Throwdown, and that was an absolute delight. And I got to skate with Black Diaspora, which was just amazing. That was truly a highlight of my derby career to date, was skating on that team.
That's awesome.
Can we expand upon that a little more? Can you tell listeners what Team Diaspora is and how you got involved, what it's meant to you specifically?
So Team Black Diaspora is I guess you would call it a satellite team. I don't know. It's a team of folks from across leagues, many different leagues, black skaters who came together to the first game was at RollerCon. Black Diaspora was formed just before the pandemic, and then they did have the opportunity to sort of skate in the high level games before COVID hit. And RollerCon, I think, was their first sort of public game. And then last April, they had the very first BIPOC Bowl in Colorado. And that was sort of a really great jumping off platform for the team. And then we ended up playing one of Rose's home teams in Portland this summer. And that was sort of like the very first time Black Diaspora did the thing. And it was just like the most magical experience. I ended up getting involved because James Bond, who skates with Colorado Shriners in Denver, invited me to come because they were looking for folks. And at first I was really nervous about it. And then I'm so glad that I went. And it was really cool to be on a team with folks of similar mindsets. And we're going to skate together in Louisiana in February. And then we're going to go to Bodas in March. I'm going to skate with them at Bodas instead of Team New York, much to some of my Gotham teammates' chagrin. But I am very excited to skate with Black Diaspora.
Bodas, for listeners, is Battle of the All-Stars. It happens in Pennsylvania. It's been going on for many, many years. And also, I think, took a bit of a hiatus with the pandemic, but has come back. Is this their first year back or second?
First year back, yeah. It's fun. I think Bodas in 2020 was in February. It was before sort of shit hit the fan. And that was the very last roller derby that I did. Yeah. Crazy.
It's a fun tournament.
We've come full circle.
You mentioned being nervous about the initial invite to Team Black Diaspora. What were you nervous about exactly? What was on your mind?
Well, for listeners listening, I am very white presenting. I was nervous about taking up space in that space. My
Mhm.
grandfather was black. He married my grandmother, who is Swedish, and my dad and his six siblings are all sort of a mixture. My grandfather died when I was really young, so I knew him, but I didn't have the opportunity to sort of have him influence my life the way I, in retrospect, wish it had been. Like, he would have beaten the shit out of my fucking boyfriend and been like, "Let us stop it. Don't possess."
Mm.
He's great.
Oh,
I don't have very many pictures of him. Anyway, so I was worried about that aspect, and I talked to my grandma about it because obviously she knew grandpa best, and she thought that it was a good idea. And Jams thought it was a really good idea, and I really just have to give Jams Bond a shout out because I think without them, I would not have joined the team, and I would have missed out on all those wonderful experiences. So yeah, that's why I was nervous, but they were great. It's great. All great.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that
yeah.
invulnerability. We appreciate it for sure.
I have another question actually relating to that. So, what has it been like for you in general, being a racial person who is largely white passing, like you said, in settings like roller derby at large or your time at Dartmouth? Or I would even imagine, working at the Wall Street Journal, it's probably predominantly white.
Yeah, it's funny because I like never thought about it when I was younger. Like, I mean, I'm Turkish, so my mom's whole family is Turkish, so we're Middle Eastern. Her whole family's Muslim. I'm agnostic. We won't go into that, but technically that's also an element of my mixed race. And I never really I always just like check the white box. As I am growing up,
Mhm.
and I don't check the white box anymore. So I feel like it's been a 30-year growth thing for me, and roller derby has actually really helped me with that. I remember being on the fence about sort of applying to the first BIPOC Bowl last year, and I was like, do I belong here? Like, I don't even know what the heck I'm doing. And then a bunch of my friends, like Wednesday Adams from Boston, was like, "Yes, what are you doing?" So I'm gonna go to BIPOC Bowl this year, but it's been actually that's been one of the most rewarding aspects of growth I've experienced in this past year. In terms of being that sort of person at Dartmouth and in roller derby and at work, I feel like at work probably I feel like I am being the most representing because lab journalists are white or cis men, and they're very good at their jobs, but their perspectives are limited by their experiences. And I gotta be honest with you, my name gets mispronounced all the fucking time, and it drives me absolutely insane. Um,
Island, no.
it's sometimes it's like the subtle stuff. It's like sort of this idea of like questioning the narrative that we're being offered by our competitors, by press releases, by just like our viewing of the news in general. So I think of myself as like the counter programming kid, where I'm like, is that really what's going on here? Can we say that?
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, I think at Dartmouth it was similar, but I don't think that I had grown enough as a person to leverage that aspect of my identity when it came to critical thinking.
Yeah. So you've also mentioned on social media working as a journalist that you can't be overly partisan on socials. Has that been really difficult for you? Because I've seen you be a very opinionated person. So I'd imagine that would be really difficult.
Yeah, so social media policies vary from publication to publication. Where I currently work, it is limited. I think really it's almost like an unspoken code among journalists that like you can be opinionated. It becomes pretty obvious what side of the aisle you're on. But you can't be aggressive about it. You never wanna you never wanna tweet about something and then have yourself be asked to write a story about it later and then have tangible proof out there that you have an opinion one way or the other. It makes it very difficult for you to have discourse with sources and have those sources believe that you are seeking objective truth as much as you can and trying to offer a balanced analysis of insight. So as frustrating as it sounds to be nonpartisan on social, it actually to me is very intuitive. Like honestly, I'm also like I don't understand people who are like overshares on Twitter. I'm like, why do people need to know that? Just don't. Just don't like that. So I never had that problem. I think.
Cool.
Yeah, usually when
Thinking
I
about
get
where we want to
frustrated, I just
go.
tell people to go vote nonpartisan.
That's
Yeah,
good.
can't go wrong with that.
Right.
A lot of what you report on right now is like climate stuff and like stuff that has kind of like some big, heavy, like world consequences, just like heavy shit, and that you have reported on in the past. And does that ever make it like difficult, to kind of turn that part of your brain off? Like, how do you kind of manage boundaries around work, or how do you kind of sit with some of this stuff and get through it? Does skating contribute to that? Are there other ways that you kind of keep your spirits up enough, given that a lot of times you're really immersed in like heavy stuff?
Yeah, I love skating because for 2 to 3 hours, I don't have to look at my phone. It's one of the most exhausting aspects of being a journalist is that you have to know everything that's going on at all times. There's
Mm.
no, I don't want to read the news. I don't want to doom scroll today. Your responsibility is to know what's going on, so you can't escape it. My old job that I had before Wall Street Journal was at Business Insider, and there I was the primary climate reporter, and then I transitioned straight to COVID reporting for 2 years, and so those two subjects were extremely, extremely difficult to write about. I mean, climate change is extremely difficult to write about because you have to write about it, but nobody reads it. And so much of journalism is traffic driven that you end up looking bad because no one's reading your stuff because you're writing that doomsday crap all the time. And it was particularly difficult because it was around the era of Greta Thunberg and the UN and some questionable environmental decisions that our government was making. And then going from that straight into COVID was just like fucking kicking the ass because I would pick fights with my family because I would be so anxious about the pandemic that, my brother would come home and he didn't put hand sanitizer on or wash his hands this one time. And I got like so freaked out about it that we got into this huge fist fight in our living room over curly caution. And like dad had to come in and like hockey a rack between the two of us. And yeah,
Roughhousing.
that was a low point. It was a particular low point in the Woodward family pandemic saga. And my brother and I actually get along really well now. Hopefully, he never listens to this. But it got to the point where like I couldn't divorce my like personal and professional thoughts at one point. Derby really helped with that. The absence of Derby during the pandemic made that extremely challenging. I've been very fortunate at the Journal to be writing about other things like space and things that sort of inspire curiosity and wonder and make me stoked to be a human more often than before. So I'm grateful for that. But it is definitely always a challenge to, I don't know, be the first one to write about like some new COVID symptom that they discovered and then wrote about in this on peer reviewed preprint and then have to write about it and then go out into the world knowing this information before everybody else does. And then does it affect your decisions? Should it affect your decisions? Should it affect your family's decisions? I don't know. But yeah, I rambled a little bit, but it was stressful. It's a stressful time.
Yeah, I remember kind of as that was happening, really hearing about some of that stuff and really feeling like that has to be so hard to be like steeped in it, especially while a lot of people are kind of trying to forget that it's happening, and just having all that data and information kind of swirling around all the time. I would imagine it being hard to put it down. And then, of course, like you said, not having Derby. What's the most exciting thing you've written about recently that has given you, a sense of wonder?
I wrote about this really cool procedure that they're doing at Boston Children's Hospital where if you tear your ACL, they put this like marshmallow like implant in there and they sew one of the torn stubs to it and it helps your like it's a scaffold for your natural ACL to grow back together. So you don't have to have that like ridiculous graft from another part of your body. And I just remembered thinking when I was writing about this, I pitched the idea. being like, oh God, I was like 10 years too late for this. So I like writing about stuff that make the world a better place and like would have made my experience better and hopefully will make somebody else's experience better.
I love that.
All you skaters out there, there's hope if you tear your ACL in the future.
Yeah.
It's
I want
funny.
to read that one.
I'll send it to you if you want. I have it as a PDF.
Sick.
Please, actually.
Maybe we'll link it in the show notes, actually. That'd be cool.
Oh, we're going to. That's definitely happening.
Yeah, go for it.
If that's okay with you. So, okay. So you're a consummate athlete, certainly. You're, from my understanding, quite busy with your work stuff. What
Very
else do
busy.
you like to do in your free time? Do you have?
That's a great question.
Okay.
Rarely. It depends. I take it when I can get it. A journalist is never done. Like it depends completely on the deadline. Like I'll be up at 3 a.m. interviewing someone in Southeast Asia, or like the story deadline will be 11 a.m. So I'll be up at 6 or whatever. It really all depends. I'm always reading at least 2 books at the same time. That way I can have like a book for one mood and a book for the other. Usually one book is one book that I've already read. I love to drink coffee and eat cupcakes. That's not a pastime, but I'm going to put it on here. I really enjoy
counts.
hiking. Uh, during the pandemic, I spent a lot of time with Daryl Concha, one of my really good friends and former Gotham skater. She skates with Twin State Derby now. Small world.
Full circle,
We
baby.
did a lot of I know, right? We did a lot of hiking in New Hampshire's White Mountains. So like we did Mount Washington. We're trying to do all the like 4,000 footers up there. And I like to surf. I like to surf with my dad. Neither of us are very good, but we love it. Haven't gotten eaten by any sharks yet, so that's good. And yeah, my favorite place in the whole world is Barnes and Noble. So many of these aforementioned activities are done at Barnes and Noble, and that's generally where you will find me. At least once a day, every day.
We love. To bring it back a little bit, kind of speaking about balancing time and, work and your own athletic endeavors and these things that you kind of do just for enjoyment. You mentioned earlier that you're also a part of coaching committee, and that's its own type of leadership position. Could you talk a little bit about kind of what that entails for you, and share a little bit maybe about like how you got there?
Sure. So my first coaching experience was actually in Santa Cruz. They had a very robust A-team infrastructure with several really great coaches, and there were no coaches available for the B and C combined team practices. And at the time, skaters were allowed to be coaches there. I don't think that's the case anymore. So I agreed to do it. And it was one of the like most rewarding things that I did while I was at Santa Cruz, because I think I really helped the development of this pool of skaters in terms of game opportunities, in terms of ensuring that strategies trickled down from the A team, and ensuring that these skaters felt like they had a place in the league. And I don't know, it helped me gain confidence in being a strategist. It helped me gain confidence in leading a practice. And I had coached ski racing before coaching roller derby. And so I just applied a lot of the same fundamentals of, trying to teach the same concept in multiple ways so that different types of learners would have hopefully at least one method with which to connect with the material I was trying to teach. And when I came to Gotham, the coaching committee processes the league votes on the coaching committee, and you all do your 2-minute stump speech. And I remember sort of feeling very sheepish about my stump speech, but Lo Mame, one of the Gotham skaters, really spoke up and was like, "Hey, this person from another league says that they want to coach and have something to offer. I feel like they should get the chance to do that." And I got picked for the coaching committee, and it was great. I was like so flattered and honored. I was like, I do not have anything to teach Roxy Dallas. Good. So I in 2019, it was a lot of sort of our open all league practice things. But then during the pandemic, I think I got asked to coach the Santa Cruz Junior League because their coaches are some of my best friends. They were my home team coaches when I was out there, and Derby wasn't happening here and it was happening there. So I agreed to coach from time to time when I visited and accompany them on their tournaments. And I don't know why, but they all really like me. All these juniors are so good at roller derby, and for some reason, like to listen to what Yeti has to say. So weird, but I appreciate it, and it really like revitalized my hope for the sport and myself in a time when there was no hope. Like these skaters are so incredible and so talented, and also like 14 years old. And
Mhm.
that was really, I think, when I really felt like I blossomed into a good coach. And then in
Mhm.
2022, when Gotham sort of came back, I, with a lot of help from Roxy and Bonita and Cherry and Livy and a bunch of other people on coaching, really coached a lot. And I still think it's more fun to coach juniors because they're willing to try everything. But I also coached at RollerCon this year with Daryl, and I've just been sort of growing my repertoire. I'm not the sort of level of Roxy of like, I'm not going to go somewhere and get asked to coach there, but I still feel like I have a lot to offer in terms of being a good mentor. And I think Brooklyn, my home team, I think that myself and Kill Valentine and Bella, my other two captains, have really done a great job of fostering a supportive development environment. And you can see it in our skaters. And that makes me happy. Feels like I've done a good job.
When you speak to the future of the sport and being inspired by the juniors, it made me think of, the new roller derby skaters that are out there and yet to be. If somebody approached you, a roller skater approached you, or maybe a non skater approached you and asked you what it takes to be a roller derby skater and what they should expect as someone totally outside of the sport other than maybe being a fan, what would your advice be for them?
I think you should expect that at some point the sport will take over your life and then you slowly let it go to a manageable level. I think that you almost need to be obsessed to possess that passion for roller derby.
Mhm.
And I think that some people assume that they're not the quote unquote consummate athlete and therefore roller derby is maybe not a good choice, but nothing could be further from the case. I think starting roller derby makes you an athlete. And there's no definition of what an athlete is. Like just because I've done sports for 3 decades doesn't make me any more of an athlete than somebody who started roller derby a year ago. I think being an athlete is a mindset of being dedicated to something, to being willing to be uncomfortable in order to improve as in the pursuit of something that at that particular moment in time you care a lot about. So I think I would probably say that. And honestly, some of the best skaters are people who have no athletic background whatsoever. And you're like, how are you so good at this?
Mhm.
That's so cool to hear because I know so many people that are kind of on the fence and unsure of whether it's right for them. And I feel like that's going to be really encouraging for those people to hear.
I feel like we've all sort of reset to zero with COVID. Like we're all relearning what it means to be a roller derby athlete. And like, yeah, a lot of us have like base level skills that we brought from the before time, but I don't skate the same way that I did in 2019. It's like a constant relearning journey. I think that now's a great time to start roller derby because really we're all starting from scratch a little bit. I think following COVID, we're all in the process of relearning what it means to be a roller derby athlete. And I don't think any of us are the same roller derby athlete as we were in 2019. And so it's a great time to join the fray, as it were, and relearn with us.
Yeah, like in some ways, it almost seems like, at least in some leagues and some cities and stuff, like joining now is almost like getting it at the ground level where some things are kind of being rebuilt, which is actually kind of an exciting time to get involved. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's kind of wisdom for everyone in terms of what it means to claim something, right? What it means to claim being an athlete or to get to say that you are an athlete. And it just resonates with me in terms of performance too, because I'm like, am I a performer? And it's like, well, literally, I've been on stage performing, so I guess I am, but I never feel like I am because I'm like, well, I'm not good enough yet, or I haven't practiced enough, or I don't have a background in theater, or I don't have XYZ. But it's like, well, if you're doing the thing and if you're in practice with that thing, it is about being in practice. It is about, and like in practice, not just like for the 2 hours that you're there with the team, but like having a practice mentally for yourself, having a practice around how you think about it, what you desire, what you want to move towards, how you frame your own goals and your own mindset. And I think it extends, to just like so many things. I think as adults, we're conditioned to like not pick up new things. And it can actually be really hard to enter new realms. And it's just something in our society. It's like by your time you're an adult, you're supposed to be good at this thing. You're supposed to already have it, or you're supposed to have this part of your identity. And it's just not true,
Nope.
It's just not true.
I love that. You put it so eloquently. This idea that by this time, there's no new frontiers left for us. There's nothing accessible for us to learn and start over from the beginning. Even I'm attempting to do wrestling, and it was extremely challenging to find a fundamental adults class, like from baseline.
I'm sure.
Everything was set up for people who had been wrestling their whole lives. And I think that's the case with a lot of things. And so to the point where I'm like, all right, I guess I'll just do more of the stuff that I already know how to do. I'll play my clarinet, I'll tap dance. But what if you want to try new things? You should. And I think roller derby, at least, despite its foibles, wants to be accessible to people who want to try new things at this point in our lives.
Yeti, the consummate learner. I'm so glad you brought up wrestling. Tell us about your wrestling journey. I've been wanting to know. Tell us more. What inspired you? What are you doing? Tell us.
New craft. And I thought wrestling would be great crash training for roller derby. I know you're supposed to strength train and do pryos and cardio and stuff, but I hate doing cardio. And I feel like wrestling tricks you into doing cardio. And it's hilarious because I showed up to my first class and they were teaching us this thing where you put someone's foot in your armpit and we're like, lift up their legs so that they're only on one leg and then they're bouncing around like a chicken. And I was like, is this legal? Can I do this? And they were like, no, Yeti, this is the whole point. And I was like, but that's mean. So I don't know. It's just a different way of thinking about using your body. I promise her I'd put anybody's skate in my armpit.
I feel like I need a visual for that one. I want to see that.
Yeah, I could show it to you sometime.
Cool.
Definitely. Where do you do it as an adult? Like how do you wrestle? Like, are you just going to places where you're just kind of learning skills? Do you get to have bouts with people? What's the accessibility like for you? Because with derby, it is kind of a sport that historically was geared towards adults who had never played. And it was kind of like, come on in, adults, let's learn a thing together and build a thing together, as opposed to all these other sports where it is kind of like, if you haven't been doing it since you were a kid, finding a space to learn it is hard. Where are you wrestling? What's happening?
Well, there's a gym out in Hoboken that has this adult fundamentals class. I don't think actually there are very many bouting opportunities. So it really is just learning fundamentals, which is fine for me. I enjoy that too. But it does really throw into sharp relief how much of a privilege it is to decide to play roller derby and get to play roller derby, because we do offer these opportunities to compete, to play games, to travel, to compete. And I think that's one of the aspects of derby that drew me to it, at least as someone who had so much of their life centered around competition. And then I didn't have that opportunity anymore. And I was like, well, what do I do with my competitive self? Roller derby was great for that.
It sounds like for you, a part of sports is not necessarily just having the practice or just having the thing that you're doing, but is that competition, having something to drive you forward. I'm kind of thinking about how like skiing, to my understanding, is kind of more of a solo thing. Like you can do it in teams, but at the end of the day, you're the one going down the hill by yourself. With roller derby, it's this team thing where at the end of the day, the game is not on any one person ever, And I'm kind of curious too about what it's like to compete in those really different circumstances and environments for you.
I can't tell you what a relief it was to play a team sport after being a solo athlete for my whole life. I mean, dance too, even. Yes, we are choreographed, we are in sync, but you got to nail the turn. Nobody going to turn for you. And with skiing in particular, when the results of races are decided by hundredths of seconds, like measurements of time that are just incomprehensible to the human brain, it's so hard. Or like, you would drive 8 hours, you would pay your race entry fee, you'd wax your skis for 3 hours, you'd go up and inspect the course, you'd get into the start gate, and fuck, you'd miss the second gate. And that's it for you. That's it. That's your whole race. Done ski. So it was
Mhm.
a lot of pressure
Mhm.
all the time. And the clock is a dispassionate judge. So there's no excuses. There's nowhere to hide in ski racing. I'm not saying there are places to hide in roller derby, but there are more places to hide in roller derby. And I was a jammer for a long time. I jammed before I came to Gotham, and that did not last very long at Gotham. But with jamming, it was a little bit of the same. There wasn't as many places to hide as a jammer because you were responsible for getting lead and scoring some points and calling off the jam and stuff. And so that's why I think when I got to be a blocker, when I showed up to my first all-star practice and I got 2 back blocks as a jammer, and then Whiskey was like, "Hello, you're gonna pivot for the rest of your life. Get good at blocking." I was like, "Great. This is great. This is like the start of a new me. It's like 4 people on the track together, and it's not just all on me." And I love that part of roller derby so much. I love that, like, the clock resets after 2 minutes, and there's 60 minutes in which you can do good things, and you're not gonna miss the second gate and get kicked out of the game.
I mean, to be fair, for our listeners, because I have insight into who you are, I know that you're still pretty hard on yourself, regardless. So I just want to name that. But I'm glad that it feels like less pressure. It sounds like they're pretty different environments for you.
Yeah.
It makes me think too about, I guess I'm wondering, like, what is it about competition for you, that makes you tick? Is it kind of the you versus you thing? Do you like going out and competing against other people? Is it the pressure to improve? Like, what is it about competing that you
These are
love?
deep questions that I often don't ask myself.
We're going there.
I've always I've always been an externally motivated person. My brother, bless his soul, is extremely internally motivated, and I'm constantly jealous. I don't know who I am as a human without some sort of objective, whether that is to win a Pulitzer as a journalist, whether that is at some time and place to win the Hydra, whether that was to make the US Olympic team as a ski racer. Like, life makes sense to me when there is an objective, and typically that objective is centered around competition. I'm not saying that's a healthy way to live your life because it's not. It's just one of my foibles that I don't think I'm ever going to outgrow. But I think for me, having that sort of external motivation keeps me disciplined. I don't have a lot of great self discipline if I exist in sort of a free form space. Like, I eat right so that I can be better at ski racing. I work out so that I can be a better roller derby player. I like take care of myself and journal and read and do things that make time for me, that make me relax so that I could be a better coach and a better journalist. So, for what it's worth, I think that objectives surrounding competition give my life structure. I wish that I was mentally strong enough to do those things for me, but I'm not. And that's okay.
At least you
Yeah.
have the self awareness. That's major.
That took a
And
long time.
honestly, like, yeah, it does. But also, like, I'm sitting here and I'm like, I don't know, like, even being able to stay up on those things and stay motivated to get better or improve in the ways that you want to is kind of its own form of self-discipline, like, not to throw anyone under the bus, but I've heard plenty of roller derby skaters that are just bitter that they're not better, but they're not really putting in the work. And that to me is a lack of self-discipline in some ways. That's kind of like, okay, blame it on everyone else, but you can also just do the work to improve or set your own goals. And like, when I see you and what I know about you and our time together, I do see you as someone who's pretty disciplined. And even if that's coming from an external motivator, like, I don't know, like, I just feel like you work really hard at the things that you do and you hold yourself to a pretty high standard. And, I guess I want you to give yourself a little more credit.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah,
Not to put you on
you
the
definitely
spot too
you definitely
much.
hit the nail on the head. I do hold myself to a pretty high standard. And I guess if we're talking about foibles, like I feel like sometimes I'm aware of sort of maybe how my day-to-day life is sort of built on this house of cards. And so sometimes
Mm,
I think I often prioritize other people's needs over my own. I say
mm,
yes a lot to a lot of things. And I think a lot of the times it's because it's easier to make someone else's life better than it is to sometimes work on myself. Because I know I have this built-in external objective structure that I can always fall back on.
yeah, I hear that. It's
Do you,
relatable.
do you feel like you discovered that on your own, or has this been processed through therapy or any other sort of reflection?
I haven't been to therapy in very many years. I When my boyfriend broke up with me in grad school, I went to therapy a lot, and I think it didn't really work for me at the time. And so I think a lot of this processing has actually happened since he broke up with me. It's been like 6 years now or something, and I think that I I I went backwards a lot during that relationship. It was like a 5 year relationship, and I think as I processed moving forward as my own person, while I processed how to be my own person by myself in a community where a lot of people have partners and are married or families, I realized sort of what makes me tick because a lot of my reflection about what went wrong sort of helped me discover these things about myself. And I think that they're completely divorced from that relationship, but I think the breakup was a great catalyst for me to evaluate who I was as a person.
As they often can be.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Hmm.
And speaking to external motivators, again, you're a person who has achieved a great deal in your life in general. Do you ever feel like you're carrying on a legacy of your elders? Like I saw that on social media, you mentioned your grandfather, for instance, who is one of the first African American men to receive an MD from the University of Rochester, and he championed healthcare access for the underserved. So those are like really big shoes to fill for this person that you mentioned you haven't met, but it seems like he has a great deal of influence on your life and your path today.
Yeah, I mean, he died when I was 4.5. So any formative memories that I have really, I don't remember. But
Yeah.
the I think that the Woodward family holds itself to pretty high standards across the board. Like there's a lot of familial, not pressure, but like you gotta be the best you can be, and everybody seems to be a pretty good best them, so competition is pretty fierce.
The competition in your family.
Um,
Wonder where
and
that comes from.
I'm not saying that it's like the Woodward cousins, like, duking it out to see, you know, who has the biggest CV
Sure.
or whatever, but I think that, like, everyone in our family is, like, trying to rise to the top of their field, like, trying to maximize societal impact, like, my brother wants to be a lawyer. He's smarter than me. So I think there's always like there's this responsibility because of the opportunities that we have had. Like my mom moved here for college from Turkey. Like if that hadn't happened, she wouldn't have met my dad. And then they decided to stay. And then I had the privilege of going to Dartmouth and skiing for Dartmouth. And my brother had the privilege of going to Dartmouth. And I feel like it's like our responsibility to use what we've learned for the betterment of as many people's lives as possible. I've decided to do that through journalism because I feel like I'm good at writing and good at communicating. Um, but I could have chosen a different path. But I always have that in the back of my mind of like you got to be the best you so that you can affect the most change. That was a long answer. I'm sorry.
It was a great answer. What are you talking about?
Please don't apologize. Please don't apologize.
I don't know where you find the energy to do all those things, though. Wow. It's amazing.
Mhm.
I run out of energy a lot these days. I also I have this like problem where I'm really bad at sitting still. I think it's gonna catch up to me at some point, but we'll just keep going until it does.
All of this kind of makes me think about some of the leadership stuff that we've kind of been talking about. I feel like there's a lot of different things kind of floating around in my head, but I'm kind of thinking about this comment you made earlier that stuck out to me around this question of like, I don't really understand why these junior skaters really like me, like, or, are excited about me as a coach and stuff. And I'm thinking about kind of what you just shared. And like, I don't know. I think like a lot of adults in the world are so busy thinking about themselves and just kind of going through the motions because it's easy to do that in the world that we're living in right now. And it can be hard to be like present and attuned with people that we're working with, and especially with like kids. And I think, I don't know, like from my experience, even just working with adolescent clients as a therapist, and also like all my babysitting, and also working with junior roller derby skaters, like kids and youth are just a little more attuned to the energy that people give off and attuned to people being present and stuff like that. And I'm thinking about all this and I'm like, you really bring a lot in terms of just even what you're modeling in the world for younger people, who they can be, how they can show up, the ways they can think about being an athlete, or think about the things they want to be able to do in the world, or how they want to relate to other people. So it's not really a question, but just a reflection, that I can totally see why they love being coached by you. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm wondering too, like in terms of, does anything that you're sharing now kind of relate to why you like working with young people at all, or is that just me kind of stretching that, making that association myself?
No, I mean, again, it's so eloquent and I appreciate it. Not just because you're saying nice things, but because it helps me reflect a little bit too. I think I've always been drawn to youth coaching in particular because coaches had such an impact on my life when I was growing up. And I know how positive and how negative a coach's presence can be and the impact that they
Gosh,
make.
yes.
And I had a lot of coaches growing up, a lot of skiing coaches, a lot of coaches that wanted a piece of me because I happened to be successful. They wanted to live vicariously. They couldn't live through their own children. A lot of coaches who, it was kind of like who's got the bigger car, for lack of an idiom. They would collect athletes and compare quivers of athletes, and everybody wanted me and their particular quiver. But when I was in my gap year between college and high school, I had one coach. Her name was Beatty, and I had never had a female coach that I respected to that level, who had that much of an impact on me. And I think whether I knew it or not, when I was like, if I'm ever going to coach anyone, I want to be like Beatty. Like, I want to have that positive impact on someone. And so I think that when I coach, I try and be more objective. I try to leave my ego out of the equation because I think a lot of coaches don't do that. And just, yeah, kind of like what you said, like lead through example. Like, I would never ask them to do something that I wouldn't do myself. And I think coaches do that a lot. So,
Yeah, my heart feels
yeah.
warm. um, but yeah, I really relate to that experience. For me with hockey, it was definitely a similar thing where like some coaches would really make or break the season depending on how they treated us as individuals and as a team. And the adults we have around us as young people have a big impact on us. And I think as adults, it's easy to kind of forget that. So
Yeah.
I love to hear that you're kind of keeping that in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like it. I experience this at work sometimes because I'm orders of magnitude younger than many of the people in my office. Like, I am very young compared to a lot of my colleagues. And I think that there are some colleagues that are fantastic mentors, and there are some colleagues that, they're doing their own thing. Like they are making their own ways in the world, as Max so eloquently put earlier, and they forget that the way they approach work can impact people who are younger and trying to learn. So I experience that on the other end at work a lot.
Really keeps it all in perspective when you're still experiencing it in your own way. Your respective youth to your colleagues keeps you in touch with the present youth of the team that you're coaching, the juniors that you're coaching.
Definitely. 100%.
Very cool.
Okay, if you could give any piece of advice to a junior skater, what would you say to them?
Oh,
I know it's a very broad question.
I will give a controversial answer and then a milquetoast answer.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
My controversial answer. My controversial answer would be, don't let the adults in the adult league that you are either directly or ancillarily connected to discourage you or make you feel like you are not good at roller derby because they are scared that you are better than they are. Because you are better than they are, and you will age up and you will take their spot, and you shouldn't feel bad about it. So that's my controversial answer.
I love that answer.
I
love that answer.
Yeah. My milquetoast answer would be I wish that I had played roller derby as a junior. I wish I had found roller derby. I wish, in particular, I had found Santa Cruz roller derby. The Santa Cruz Derby Groms, their junior program, is just iconic. I cannot say enough good things. I would not spend my time and extremely hard-earned money to go and coach them if I did not feel that way. I would tell them that they need to take all the lessons that they learn, both about being a good roller derby player, but also about being a good human and a good teammate, and take that into their adult lives. I think I was really good at skiing, but I was really bad at people at that age. And I wish I had had that sort of structure, like social structure, where I could learn from people who were slightly older than me and be a mentor for people who are slightly younger than me and figure out how I fit into this ecosystem of athletes, of, people who are all awkward and bonded over a mutual love of a sport, because I needed that at that age and I didn't get it. So I would tell them to cherish it, I think.
Something that kind of came out of one of our interviews this season with Marwa is she wrote a book for young people, and it's like a coming of age kind of advice sort of book. And I read it as a 36-year-old, and a lot of it really resonated with me. And similarly, as you're speaking about the experiences of these young people, it's resonating with me as an older person, but a younger spirit as a skater, if you will. And when you speak about wanting them to be not only, good teammates, but also good people, that really resonated with me. I am near to crying about what you said right now, because it really hit for some reason. Because that's something that is so frequently overlooked, just being a good human being. And I think that it's really uplifting to hear that you're imparting that to young people. That's really fucking cool.
Thanks.
I really like that a lot. I'm crying. Damn you, Yeti. Leave me alone.
Well, honestly, it resonates with you because I think people forget. You asked me why I'm so empathetic, and it's because I don't think you can be a good athlete and truly be a good athlete and not be a good person, or at least strive to be a good person. Obviously, it's difficult to be a good person all the time, but if you don't think about that aspect of you, you're never going to be the best athlete you can be. And that's why, at least this junior program that I help with in Santa Cruz, that's why I love them so much, because their coaches are reminding them that that's more important than being good at roller derby. And it makes me a better person just by proxy, just by being in the room with all of those people who are working on that. And it's really hard to find these days, I think. You're gonna make me cry now, so don't make me. I'm not gonna cry.
Yeah. Yeah. It's y'all. I love y'all. I die.
But too, in terms of just, circling back to something we were saying way earlier in the conversation is,
Yeah.
being older and still kind of like discovering your purpose, which is very much a space that I relate to and find myself in. Um, my my CV and my accomplishments and even my skating ability, it's like none of it adds up to a lot on paper, but the ways that I've been able to connect with other people and be there for other people and sort of, be part of that larger community and part of that experience has been the most important part of skating for me.
Yeah. Well, not to make it too political, but also like that's white culture is like you are all the things on your CV.
Yeah.
Period. Like that's literally like we're so wrapped up in like what's the word, like achieving things, and that's supposed to mean something about what we're worth as human beings. Like that's so like American white capitalism is that like I grew up in that, it's like overachieving constantly because it's somehow going to make me feel better about myself or who I am. But that also is a house of cards, in many ways. And like something I've learned a lot in the last few years, as I've done some of my own kind of like racial development stuff for myself, is that the only thing that matters is relationships, like period. And like being a good person. And at the end of the day, like you can have so many accomplishments and feel super alone if you can't kind of do that people thing. And if you can't kind of try to move beyond that thing that so many of us kind of buy into, which is like, I am what I accomplish.
Yeah.
And so I put that above and ahead of other people enough so that I might be dehumanizing other people in the work that I'm doing, or I might be engaging in oppressive systems or allowing certain things to slide around me because it's easier for me. And then it kind of moves me forward in XYZ accomplishments. And those are also some of the ways that we as individuals and collectively like perpetuate some of these oppressive systems. So it's like so hard not to buy into that in many ways. So I think it's like actually so important to really interrogate these things and really think critically about them. If we as a community want to be able to like come together and like push back against some of that stuff and really think about how we're building community and how to build community that's actually sustainable. And I guarantee you, from what I know about like psychology, from what I know about my own observations, from what I know about being on my own different teams are better and people are better at anything that they try to do if they feel supported and if they feel like they can be their full selves.
Yeah.
So if we're not creating environments like that, think about all the creativity and all the people that we're leaving out and all of the stories that we're leaving out and all of the really important shit that we're leaving out because we're trying to kind of be like, here's this sort of hegemonic, like kind of like one way to do it. And if you don't fit into this because of whatever accomplishments you do or don't have, the train just keeps going. So all that to say, again, not to get too political, but like, this is how I think about it. And I think it's actually really important for us to be having these conversations. So I really appreciate both of y'all for bringing in, this very real piece of this today.
I feel like I want to go skating, Jasmine. Flash, I'm gonna now text you from
let's
time
do
to time.
it.
Y'all made me start to think about this. I mean, I think that drove a lot of my like skating around this year is really the idea of building relationships with people in a time when it's okay to not be insular. Like, in our pursuit of the Hydra, which I was fully for. We really, really sank down into our practice and we didn't talk to anyone because we didn't want anyone to steal our strategies and stuff. And like we were very focused. We are hyper focused on one goal. And this year wasn't the case. And I had the opportunity to build relationships with other people. And what y'all said really made me think about this is people make fun of me a lot because I'm an introvert, but I like to be with people. And I think it's because I like to be with people that I have built relationships with. And the number of people I've built relationships with has just flourished over the pandemic. And it also flourishes because I have the benefit of being a single person and the perpetual third wheel always. Well, I'm going to be put on my gravestone. And I think really it brings me a lot of joy to foster these relationships And I like to foster them through mutual experience. So that's why I'm always texting and being like, let's hang out. Let's go for a hike. Let's go for a skate. Or can we get coffee after work? And sometimes I like feel bad about it. Like I feel like I'm being an imposition, but oftentimes like we hang out and then the person who was nice enough to hang out with me afterwards was like, I'm really glad you reached out because I forget to reach out to people. And then I have a lot of fun and I feel better for it afterwards. So sometimes when I feel bad about being the third wheel, I remember that.
Yeah, I think it's also really easy to be in the space of like that where like it's easy to kind of assume being an imposition or to be like, oh, like I'm the one reaching out, I'm initiating, like does that mean something about the relationship? And it is easy to forget that a lot of times like other people also maybe feel that way, which is why they're not reaching out.
Yeah.
And like, you know, especially in New York, at least, like a lot of people are just busy and it's not even that they're not thinking about you or thinking about hanging out or that they don't want to or that they wouldn't be happy to. But I think it can just be like hard to connect sometimes. So I appreciate you being a champion of reaching out because it can be hard to do sometimes. And it's a very vulnerable thing to do, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a prevailing theme with people we've been chatting with this season too. I feel that people are forgetting the hanging out part of life.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
Buddies. Yeti, is there anything that you feel like you want to have some space to talk about tonight that we haven't covered?
Y'all did a really well. You did your homework. You're both hired as journalists. Anytime you want to be a journalist, look me up. I guess, and like maybe it's because we've just gotten really deep, more deep than I thought we were gonna get in this conversation, which is all the better for it.
Same.
Welcome.
I think there's like maybe like I don't know, like a personal thing that I am dealing with is I get lonely a lot. New York is a really hard place to be alone in. And I think you have to reflect on the definition of being alone because you're not alone at work and you're not alone at derby practice and you're not alone, at least in terms of like texting and slacking and the occasional calling your friends or whatever. Like you're always plugged in to somebody at some time. But guess I can't stress enough that if you're feeling really alone, um, it's important to like physically hang out with people. I think I used texting and zooming and stuff. We all did as a proxy for connection during the pandemic, and we all sort of now maybe default to that a lot. And I always push for like physical proximity, which sounds weird, but I find that that's often the only time that I feel like I'm truly close to someone these days. So I don't know where I was going with that assessment, but I think I would remind listeners that it's really easy to get wrapped up in your own life and wrapped up in your screens. And I think in order to truly foster meaningful, long lasting relationships, you need to see the person from time to time, even if it's difficult. The end. You don't have to put that in there.
Yeah,
This is something
thank
I've
you so
been
much
thinking
for
about like
sharing.
personally lately.
No, I think we should because I think, you know, we're talking about building community on this podcast in a lot of ways. We're talking about skate community and we're talking about what skate community means to people. And it's also one of those things where like if we're getting down to, you know, Skaterade, if we're getting down to the skating of it all, like there's so many reasons to physically share space too. It's like you can be a better skater, you can feel less alone in your learning process.
Yeah.
You again can build community. Like, and again, like you said, especially in New York where it's so hard to build community, it's so easy to feel alone. And like the definition of alone sometimes in New York has to maybe look different.
Yeah.
I think this is super relevant. You know, like it's something that really resonated with me too. Like I feel often very alone. And in the last year, I've had to really shift my definition of like, okay, no, I'm not partnered, but I have all these people around me that like, you know, love me and care about me and want to hang out with me. If I lean into that, you know, then I'm not alone. And like, what is the stuff that I've internalized throughout my life around what it means to not be alone? And like, what is that definition for me, and reworking that has helped me build this community. And I'm hearing you say too, like your relationships have flourished in many ways. I have to imagine that those things are connected. So
Yeah.
listeners out there, you aren't alone. You got your people, and you can reach out, and remember that it's okay to reach out.
You're welcome.
And I think that's really awesome.
That's it. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. I have one final question.
Sure.
That veers off a different direction, because we must know for the listeners, what is the story behind your derby name?
I wish I could say that I had been clever enough to come up with it by myself, but I went to Disney World in December of 2015. So it was right when our fresh meat intake was ending and we were picking our derby names. And we were at Animal Kingdom and we went on the Expedition Everest ride. And there's a Yeti in the Expedition Everest ride. And in the gift shop, there was a t-shirt that said, Yeti or Not, Here I Come. And I was like, oh my God, that has to be my name. That has to be my name. And it's so appropriate because I never get cold. Like it'll be January and it'll be like 0 degrees at Crash Pad and I'll be in shorts and a tank top or eating an ice cream cone or all at the same time. So and I also like it because it's like now people buy me Yeti things. I have like 3 Yeti stuffed animals on my bed. And also you can't pronounce it wrong. Everybody knows how to say Yeti, and I love it. Everyone was like, you should pick a derby name based off your real name. And I was like, why? So they can botch my derby name at the same time as botching my real name? No. So I love Yeti. The whole Yeti rhyming with a bunch of things like spaghetti was a much later addition to my roller derby name's awesomeness. I have Roxy to thank for that. So, but yeah, it's just the name that keeps on giving, honestly.
I feel like that's sometimes the way that like the best derby names come about, though, are like those just funny side things where it isn't a play off of your name. It isn't something you thought real hard about. It's like that moment where you're just like, oh, there it is.
Oh, there
That's
it is.
for me.
Yep. And then I originally was going to go with like 0K to be my number, but it was the year that they phased out the letters. And I was like, well, I don't want to be the number 0. And then I thought, well, 2 numbers is too short for refs to call. And 4 numbers is too long for refs to call. My arm isn't big enough to put 4 numbers on. So I picked a 3 number, and 221 is the address where Sherlock Holmes lives, 221B Baker Street. So that's why I picked that. I know.
That's really important information.
I love it. I think this has been like a really well-rounded, cool conversation. And thanks for inspiring the first tear shed on the Skaterade podcast.
I love you. Yeti hug.
I love you too.
Yeah, this is great. I really appreciate all very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so
Cool.
glad to have you. Can't wait to put the episode out. Can't wait to share with others. I can't wait to hang out with you soon, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can all go skating or something. And on Sunday,
That'd be
and
cool.
it was so cool for skating.
We were just talking about that.
I've wanted to go there since I like basically
And there
moved
were
here to go
cats.
skate.
Mac, I'd never been, and it was awesome. And it was only $275 to get there.
Did you go on the gondola thing? Is that the one with the gondola
Yeah,
that like goes over, or was it how did you get there?
Yeah, it was.
That's what I want to do. I
Yeah.
want to take my skates and I want to ride on that thing.
Yeah. That's exactly what I did. I hopped on the tram at 60th and 2nd, and it poops you out right there. And if you go south, it's like the Cornell Fancy Pants campus thing, but there's like a giant hill where you could have a picnic and then you keep going, and then there's like this park thing, this like FDR park thing, and you can go all the way to the end of the island and then see the Williamsburg Bridge, and it's beautiful. And then on the other side, there's like wild cat sanctuary where they have little houses for cats, and they try and keep them in, and the door's like all padlocked, but the cats just like slip around underneath and like are just YOLOing around, and everyone's like, oh my God, let me pet you. And the cats are like, no, I just stay home. And then if you go north on the island, there's like, it's like so cool. It's like, it's a community of people, like 14,000 people live there. Like just like one grocery store, one Starbucks, one restaurant, like schools, a post office, a parking garage. And then on the other end, there's like hoity-toity fancy apartment buildings that they converted from the old hospital. They converted it into like an apartment complex that's very expensive.
Oh.
And then
Those I've seen.
yeah. And then on the far end is there's a rehabilitation center that looks very haunted, super haunted. And then if you go beyond the rehabilitation center, there's a lighthouse. It was cool.
It seems cool. I always have been like, I wonder what it's like to live on Roosevelt Island. And then I was like, would I ever want to do that? And then I was like, that seems really unhinged, honestly, but I would go skate there.
Truly. I was like, I should live here and probably be cheaper. And then I was like, it's either the tram, the subway, a ferry, or the single bridge in and out. And it just stresses me out. What if there's a zombie apocalypse? You'd be dead.
Yeah, no.
So let's go. Anyway,
no, I'm not into
TLDR,
it, but
let's go.
visiting seems nice. Let's go skate there.
Cool. Yeah, it was great having this chat with you, Yeti, and we look forward to skating with you in the future.
Yeah, thanks so much for being on with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Bye.
This is awesome. Bye, y'all.
See you next time.